Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to my first custom LEGO minifigure showcase video of 2019. As promised, we're covering Arthur Morgan from Red Dead Redemption 2, Rockstar's masterpiece of a game. And it's honestly hard to call it just a game. It's really a massive, prolonged experience that they developed over the last 8 years, fully immersing you in 1899 with your gang as some of the last remaining outlaws running from change in the new world. But I know there aren't too many Red Dead fans out there in the LEGO community, and honestly, I can't even describe it to you. You'll just have to experience it for yourself one day. The 60-hour story following Arthur and the Vanderlyn gang and exploring the stunning, incredibly detailed, seemingly never-ending world was unbelievable, and that's why I spent roughly 50 hours of on and off work over the course of 40 days to make this minifigure last year, and I just finished him on December 28th, and I can't wait to break it all down for you. So without further ado, let's get started. So clicking on this video, you may have been wondering, why is this showcase so long? It's only one minifigure, and that's because I don't want to rush through this. Much like the game, I want to kind of go slow at my own pace here and breaking down everything that went into the making of Arthur Morgan, because it was a lot, and I think it's worth it to go slow, and I hope you'll bear with me here. But beginning with the hat, it's actually a black fedora, same one used on Indiana Jones. I got this in through a Bricklink order on November 18th and immediately got to work in taking one of these hair pieces, sanding it in half at an angle so that I could glue it perfectly to the bottom of the hat. And not only that, but in doing so, I also had to take Procreate sculpting putty, which, as you can imagine, we all use to sculpt, and I had to use that to seal it in place, and then also use glue to glue it in place. And I mean, there are two distinctions there. I hope that makes some modicum of sense, but either way, the whole idea behind doing so was to make sure that, unlike minifigures in the past where I did similar modifications, that I would be able to do this and remove it safely. And I think it definitely worked here. And I think this turned out better than I was expecting, and it's more secure than I was expecting. And I'm really satisfied with it. It is as seamless as I was hoping it would be. And it was not easy though. And I had to really keep track of the alignment to make sure nothing was uneven. And I think it really worked out here. And also you'll notice that I do have the entire hat weathered, just like Arthur Morgan's in the game. And I used gray and brown paint for that. And I think it looked really good. Just a bunch of airbrushing. And you'll notice I have 2 bits of thread running around the entire hat and then kind of tying off there on the back. That's not an actual knot or anything. They're just kind of glued in place to sort of look like one. And it doesn't exactly look like this necessarily in the game, but I definitely tried, and I think it still looks pretty good regardless. And also the hairpiece, as you can see, the half hairpiece there glued onto the bottom of the hat is actually painted in my own brown color with my own Null and Oil shade running all over that. And I think that definitely topped it off. And the Procreate, I think, is barely even noticeable and wound up looking more seamless than I could have hoped for. And so I'm really proud of how the hat and hair turned out. While we've got that off, you'll notice the fully painted face here to match the likeness of Arthur Morgan. And this face turned out looking exactly as I had hoped. I mean, if I were to nitpick my own work, I'd say maybe I could have made the eyebrows a bit more slanted so he wouldn't look so neutral, but it doesn't really matter. I'm still really proud of it. And I also, of course, painted the stubble here, and painting stubbles is never fun, dot for dot, making sure those dots are not too big. And it's just, there's not much to say other than it's just a pain every single time I have to do it, and I think it still worked out here though, and it's probably one of the better stubbles that I have painted. So yeah, otherwise I've got a bunch of little dots here kind of around the eyes and eyebrows to really help in matching the likeness to Arthur, and I think they turned out looking really cool. And while we still have the hat off, I'll go ahead and lift this arm up so we can talk about the satchel really quick. And so if we just go ahead and carefully remove it, because of course the minifigure is fragile, gotta be careful. You can see we do have this entire custom made satchel, and the strap here is actually made from photo paper, and then the satchel is sculpted. So this was kind of annoying because I had to basically make sure that the satchel would be able to stay in place while the strap would also perfectly drape over the minifigure. And then I also had to consider that I would eventually be gluing this gun belt around the leg. So there was definitely a little bit of precision involved in making sure that the alignments were correct and that everything was positioned properly before I did any gluing or any final moves. And I think ultimately it really worked out exactly as I had hoped. And as you can see, that entire strap, the inside of it is painted in tan, and then I had to paint brown strips running from the actual satchel all the way to the other side, and that went for both sides of the strap, of course, so definitely a little bit time consuming there. And then the whole thing is weathered as well, and I also do have the buckles glued on as 3D elements, and those are painted with 3 different layers. And I also even have the detail on the actual satchel with a fair bit of weathering, as you can kind of see there. If I hold it up to Arthur's face, you can kind of see all the detail that went into that. So definitely pretty involved, just the satchel alone, but it turned out exactly as I was hoping. Now the rest of the minifigure, and actually real quick, we'll just get this out of the way. The Lancaster repeater is a brick arms weapon that I painted all the detail onto, and I think it turned out looking really great. This is the primary weapon that I used throughout the entire time I played the story the first time in Red Dead Redemption 2, so I figured it was fitting to use it here. And I also did not add any weathering or any sort of paint work to the brown areas, because Arthur has to grip onto this part of the weapon there, and so I can't put any paint there, and I figure it's not worth it to put any paint on the stock or toward the middle here, because that really would look inconsistent with the handle that I ultimately have to leave blank. So that's the Lancaster repeater, and I think it turned out looking pretty good. So the rest of the minifigure, now that we've got the Lancaster repeater and the satchel off for now, we'll go ahead and put this back on so it doesn't look ridiculous for the rest of the segment. And as you can see, the entire shirt is got to be the best shirt that I have ever made on a Lego minifigure. This was pretty crazy because, of course, I've got double lines going here all the way from this side of the torso onto the sleeves and onto the back of the torso. It was very long and drawn out to make sure every single one of those lines was painted in the correct position. And originally the torso and the arms were a little bit bumpy looking, and thankfully a lot of the weathering and like dirt that I added on later masked a lot of that and really made it look even cleaner than it was originally. And I think that really worked out in my favor here in making Arthur. And also the bandana that I painted as part of his shirt design is actually inspired by saber scorpions. And also you'll notice the suspenders are 3D elements. Those begin right here and then actually go up and over the top of the torso, which you can kind of see. If I remove the minifigure, you can kind of see right there exactly what I'm talking about. Those go up and over the top of the torso, and then if we spin them around, you'll see that they actually connect, and these ones are separated though, but I did my best to make sure the connection would be seamless, so you really can't even tell that they separate there, and I think that turned out looking really good. But then, yeah, those suspenders extend all the way back here. You got the back piece here, and that's a separate piece that I glued on there, and then you've got the buckle right here as well, and that's all fully painted, and I think turned out looking really good. And also one thing I'm really proud of, like I kind of alluded to a second ago there, was the dirt and all the weathering that went into the shirt. I tried my best to make sure that the dirt looked as accurate and as close to the dirt on Arthur's actual shirt in the game, and I think it turned out exactly like it appears in the game. And I even have that dirt extending all the way around the entirety of the torso with a little bit of sealant on the sides to ensure that it won't come off, because airbrushed weathering like this is definitely something that can just be easily rubbed off. And so I knew that the arms would definitely, going back and forth, making those passes would absolutely have gotten rid of it. So I made sure that wouldn't be the case here by using a little bit of sealant. And then the belt piece does have these little details that are, I don't know what they're called honestly, but these like little buckle things that start at the belt piece here and then connect to the suspenders, just like in the game. Those are there and present on the front and back of the actual belt piece. And so I think those turned out looking really great. And I know a lot of people really do like the sleeves because the transition of the double lines wound up looking really great and really clean. And everybody really loves those sleeves because they look so clean and so seamless, and those were honestly pretty straightforward and relatively easy for me. But one thing that turned out really good with the sleeves is the cuffs here that protrude from the arms. Those are actually sculpted, whereas usually I'll just use a piece of like shipping labels and just kind of glue a strip of those around to simulate the look of a sleeve. But in this case, I really wanted to make them look as accurate to Arthur's scrunched up sleeve cuffs as I could, and like I said, I did that with a little bit of sculpting, and it was pretty simple and pretty straightforward, but ultimately did a lot for the minifigure, and so I'm really proud of that as well. And if we go ahead and focus on the legs now, you'll notice that these actually started as a base color of brown. So these were straight dark brown, and to really give you an idea, they were basically this color brown when they first started out, and then I painted them in my own super dark gray color, and then I hit them with my own dark brown, my own tan weathering, just a lot of dry brushing to really simulate the exact same kind of dirt that Arthur has on his pants in the game, and I think it turned out looking really great here, and also on his boots, his black boots, which have more tan weathering, and I think that was one of the final touches actually, and also turned out looking really good. And also you'll notice one of the most challenging parts about making Arthur here was this gun belt, because this gun belt starts right here, and then wraps around the entirety of the legs. And originally I had several ideas for how I could go about this, because one thing that I really like to preserve with my minifigures, if I can, is the same disassembly that you can, still do with a Lego minifigure, the basic fundamentals of a Lego minifigure. And unfortunately, those could not be saved here because this belt had to be glued around the legs and there was no way around it. Originally, what I tried to do was basically take a piece of a Cape Madness accessory. And if you guys know how Lego capes look, you have like the little slot that goes around the minifigure post. Well, I basically tried to take one of those and then glue a piece with one of those slots like onto the side of this strap here, and then drape that over on top of the minifigure's peg. So basically what it would have looked like would have been an entirely separate strap with a little fabric extension that drapes over this piece, like this post. But unfortunately that didn't work out, and ultimately the satchel could not be draped over, and it really just, and also it was too tight and wound up being stuck around the legs anyway, so I had to cut it off, and ultimately I had to make a new one, and I wound up gluing this one in place, leaving all the detail on this side absent so that the satchel would still be able to drape over, as you just saw at the beginning of the segment. And ultimately though, when that happened, there was actually quite a significant gap left in between the satchel and the gun belt. So basically when I would take the satchel and drape it over here, you'll see there was basically like one big gap in between the actual satchel bag and the gun belt. So I had to actually sculpt a bit more onto the back of the satchel and make it thicker than it was previously so that it would look as seamless as possible. And it was very involved, and I just pumped the background there. But basically then the gun belt, once I had it glued around the legs when I was done painting the legs, that was one thing I really had to make sure I was cautious of. I had to make sure that I was completely done painting the legs and all the detail that wraps around them. That includes, these like attachments that they wore around their boots and everything. I ultimately skipped out on the spurs though on the back, even though I know those are kind of like a signature to cowboys and outlaws. If I tried to sculpt and glue spurs onto the back, I knew they absolutely would have broken off, and I didn't want to make this minifigure any more fragile than he already is. And so the gun belt, after that was done and the gun belt was secured in place, the legs were painted and everything, I then basically had to glue a separate set of 3D elements to make the separate like ammo slots, like the silver ammo slots that Arthur has, and those are separate pieces that go on top of the existing gun belt. And the same for this one on the back, it's an entirely separate piece glued on there, and then every individual line painted on top of those, and obviously it was painted in a base color of gunmetal first before those lines were painted on. And then once all that was done, I then glued on this custom like belt buckle that was actually also cut from photo paper, and then I glued that in place and painted that in gold. And before all of that even happened, as a matter of fact, and I really can't even show you, but the inside of the gun belt, much like how I painted the inside of the satchel strap, had to be painted in dark brown so that it didn't look white and, didn't look ridiculous from certain angles. So there was that. And then also the actual like gun holster here, the pistol holster, that was sculpted and glued in place. And then I had a little bit of extra space, and originally I wasn't going to, but I also took a bit of photo paper and cut out and glued in place this little knife holster. And the actual knife itself isn't there, but the holster is, and I think it looks really cool. And I mean, the same could be said for the pistol. The actual like weapons aren't there, but the holsters are, and they are fully painted, and they turned out looking really good. The actual like straps going over the holster and the buckles are all individual pieces, so that's 4 individual pieces in total that went on top of the holster, and then that were also painted. I even painted a little bit of black on top to really simulate the look of like it having a hollow interior. And I think that all turned out looking really great. And ultimately Arthur Morgan turned out looking really great. This minifigure is everything that I was hoping he would be, and that obviously came as a result of just a lot of work and never really looking at the clock and just always immersing myself in the process as I was making what I consider to be one of the greatest characters gaming has ever seen. I mean, Arthur Morgan is just an unbelievable character with a fantastic story of redemption all the way through the 60-hour story missions and the countless hours you can spend in the endless expanse that is the world that Rockstar created around you. It is an unbelievable experience that I thought was absolutely, worth it. And, that made making this minifigure worth it. And also, as you just saw, I clipped on Arthur's pistols, and I am really happy with how these turned out. His 2 revolvers, these are painted with minimal detail, but the same detail, and they are consistent with one one another and fully painted and sealed over so that none of that silver paint would chip off. And so his revolvers and the Lancaster repeater were the two primary weapons that I used as I was playing as Arthur Morgan in my playthrough. And so those were the ones that I made sure to focus on here, even though of course I could have gone with a sawn-off shotgun or the pump action shotgun. There were plenty of other weapons Brick Arms offers that he does also use in the game, but I also ultimately wound up just keeping it locked to these two so that I wouldn't have an overabundance of accessories just lying all over my desk, as those additional accessories usually do. Guys, that is it for Arthur Morgan from Red Dead Redemption 2. It was amazing playing as him that entire time. I cannot wait to eventually start up a full-on second playthrough because it is definitely worth it. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a once-in-a-lifetime game, and we're not going to have anything like it again for a very long time, so please do make sure that at some point you play through it yourself. Watch a game movie of the first Red Dead Redemption so you get caught up with the story, and then play through Red Dead Redemption 2 yourself, because I cannot stress enough how worth it is. It is an experience that I think, much like I do now, you will cherish for a long time. And now I have this minifigure to always appreciate because I'm really proud of how it turned out, and I hope you are too. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and we're going to go ahead and finally wrap up this extensive showcase. Hey, you! Me? Yeah, you. Come here, fella. Hey, what's your problem? My problem is you haven't made Dutch or John or Sadie or any other folk from my gang, so you're going to get to work on them, right? Freeze all motor functions. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for sticking around for the whole thing, and if you enjoyed this showcase, maybe found yourself inspired to play Red Dead Redemption 2 or make your own minifigures from the story, then definitely be sure to let me know down in the comments, because of course that is why I do this. And as much as I'd love to make the other members of the gang, like its leader Dutch Vanderlyn or of course John Marston, that would take away a lot of time from other projects I have going, like the advanced suit from Spider-Man PS4, MCU First 10 Years minifigs, the final Clone Wars 10th Anniversary Showcase, Captain Marvel, Avengers Endgame, Spider-Man Far From Home, Aquaman minifigures, and so many other projects I'm already taking on this year, and maybe I can make them sometime in the fall or something, but I absolutely knew that I definitely had to make Arthur because of how much the game means to me. And also a friend of mine, the Moose Figs, another incredibly talented customizer who you may have heard of already, made both of them, and I'll be sure to drop a link below. They are fantastic. But if you want to be among the first to see the minifigures from all those projects first, I always post progress photos over on Patreon if you'd like to consider supporting the channel. Otherwise, I'll be posting preview photos like these over on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook sometime after, but all of course happening long before these showcase videos make it to the channel. And I hope I'll see you in one of those places or in the next video. But thank you again for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time. All right, bye-bye. And if you enjoyed this showcase and maybe found yourself inspired to play... Hey! Where's our money, Mr. Downs? Don't come near me. I'm sick. I have tuberculosis. Oh. Damn. Well, you know what? This probably ain't worth it then. Alright, so clicking on this video, you may be wondering... to pull off this minifigure, so please do bear with me, but